Hey there, Craig from Castos. Thanks for checking out the YouTube channel here. Wanted to touch on a topic today that I think is near and dear to many podcasters' hearts, especially those who are just getting started. And the question is, how many listeners do I need to make my podcast impactful? How many listeners, how big an audience do I need to make a difference for my brand? Today, we're going to answer that. I think the first important thing here is to differentiate between a kind of entertainment podcast and a B2B podcast. I'll touch on the entertainment side first because it's less what we do here at Castos in terms of our Castos production service, but it's also kind of a murkier answer. I think if you're looking to be the next big NPR show or the next big true crime podcast, you need to be thinking about like tens and hundreds of thousands of listeners per episode. So think about the famous podcast that we all listen to. For them to make money, they need to sell a lot of advertising. And to do that, you have to have big numbers, right? The typical CPM cost per 1,000 impressions on a podcast is around $25, right? So think about $25. You might get 2 or 3 ad spots per episode times 100,000 listens or something like that. And you're talking about decent money. Thing to remember with these big podcasts in the entertainment sector, you look at the kind of credits for an NPR podcast. I use NPR, but any kind of big entertainment-based podcast, you're talking about dozens of people that work on these shows, right? The credits at the end of these episodes is enormous. So the production value, just the cost of creating one of these episodes is enormous. And so the ability for them to make money only comes from having a ton of listeners. So tens, hundreds of thousands of listeners per episode. They're usually part of networks that also help kind of cross-promote shows between the different members of the network. And that's the only way that they're able to be successful on their own, right? I'm talking about standalone podcasts. This is the only thing we do to make money. Contrast that with the way a lot of us think about podcasting, and us included, right? Castos, we have several podcasts. All of them serve the purpose of our brand. The goal of none of our podcasts or even this YouTube channel is to make money, right? And so think about the goal of our podcast, and the goal of many of your podcasts is to serve your brand, right? It's to sell more of your product or service, promote you as a personality, an authority figure in your space, and just to kind of put your name out there. We like to say a podcast or any kind of content, right? Even this YouTube channel is your kind of virtual CV, right? Your digital business card. And what happens with this is a lot of times you walk into a meeting or a new partnership or a sales conversation, or you go to a conference and people come up to you like, oh, I've seen your podcast, or I've seen your YouTube channel, I've read your blog, I get your newsletter. Instantly, you have a leg up on everyone who's not doing that. You have trust, you're viewed as an authority figure, people like and respect you, hopefully, right? If you're doing content the right way. And so what this means is that the work you put in over here to build the audience and the kind of library of content as a creator for your brand is giving you an edge up in basically everything else you do, whether you're a solo kind of consultant or contractor, whether you're a medium-sized company, whether you're a big enterprise and you're looking to close that next big deal. Podcasting, content in general, but podcasting in particular, because there's so much authenticity to it and you're able to have such intimate, deep relationships and conversations with people, just gives you that edge up in everything else you do for your brand. So the answer is like, how many listeners do you have to have for a B2B podcast? Is not that many, right? Think about hundreds. If your show is really niched down, you don't need that many people listening to really make a material impact on your brand. Think about the last time you were able to have a kind of pre-sales conversation with 100 people every week. I have a sales background, not very often, right? Unless you're going to small conferences every week and you're able to get up on stage and do a roundtable or something like that. That's about the only other avenue I know of where you can have an in-depth conversation with people on your topic and you are able to hold an audience's attention for 20, 30, 45 minutes every time you publish new content. There's nothing like it, right? So as you are a brand and are thinking about like, how big of an audience do I need to make a difference here? The answer is not much, right? Talking hundreds of people listening per episode, as opposed to on the entertainment side over here, we're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of people to be able to make a real difference, make money, and make an impact for your brand. So I think that you first have to decide kind of which side of this fence am I on, and then what is the goal of the podcast, right? Is it just to have a great true crime show? That's awesome, right? But you just know that you have to get a ton more listeners. If the podcast is for your brand, you don't need as many people to listen because you know that the thing that will happen in the end is some kind of better outcome for your brand. And that's a bit the long game, right? And it's tough to connect those dots sometimes for us. But just keep that in mind as you're kind of formulating the strategy for your podcast, for any piece of content really, right? Is what's the purpose? How's this going to serve my brand? And then when you're developing those KPIs, think about like, okay, if I'm on the B2B side, I'm talking like hundreds of people that I need to listen to make a real impact. So I hope that helps give kind of a thought process around how to decide what an ideal or kind of goal size of your audience is for your podcast, depending on which kind of side of that fence in you live in, whether it's an entertainment podcast or whether it's a B2B podcast that's supporting your brand. As always, if you're enjoying our content here, please think about liking and subscribing. Click the bell at the bottom of the screen here. Details about Castos and everything we can do to help you on your podcasting journey are in the description below. Thanks so much.